Nicolas Maduro appeared in a U.S. courtroom Monday after his stunning capture in Caracas over the weekend. The leftist leader pleaded not guilty to drug trafficking and other charges, insisting he's still president of Venezuela. Maduro's kidnapping has been justified by the Trump administration as a, quote, surgical law enforcement operation. Our New York correspondent Jessica Mazzuria told us more from outside the courthouse in Manhattan.
Deposed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro made his first court appearance for his arraignment on charges of drugs and weapons trafficking here at 500 Pearl Street on Monday. He pleaded not guilty to all of the charges brought against him. Outside the courthouse, there were heated scenes with both pro and anti-Maduro demonstrators.
Yankees, go home!
Hands off Venezuela!
It's a cover story for the real political agenda, which is regime change in Venezuela. They want a government that does not, want to protect its own sovereignty. They want a government that will open its doors to extraction of resources and oil.
America! I love Donald Trump. He's the only president that could have done this.
Viva Venezuela!
Viva Venezuela! Y hoy, hoy Venezuela está libre.
Our people has been oppressed for so many years. It's been almost 27 years, and we have been fighting against this dictatorship. Our only hope was for the U.S. to help us.
Maduro and his wife have now been transferred back to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where they will await their next court hearing on March 17th.
And as that trial of Nicolas Maduro gets underway in New York, our Ellen Gainsford takes a closer look at the key figures in court.
In this courtroom sketch, we get a first glimpse of trial lawyer Barry Pollock flanking his client. He's expected to argue that, as head of state, Nicolas Maduro is entitled to immunity. It's a tactic that legal experts are unsure will hold.
Typically, the head of state can't be prosecuted. Now, an important caveat is it has to be the head of state as recognized by the U.S. State Department, and the U.S. State Department does not recognize Maduro as the legitimate ruler of Venezuela. That's why it specifically says in the indictment he is the illegitimate ruler of the country.
The prominent Washington-based lawyer is perhaps best known for representing WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. In another internationally renowned case, Pollock has more than 30 years of experience. His other clients have included top executives and government officials. The man he'll have to convince is Judge Alvin Hellerstein, who's already attracting international attention, while U.S. President Donald Trump has made complimentary remarks about the 92-year-old.
The judge is very respected, Judge Hellerstein. He's a highly respected judge. We'll see how we do. The case it's infallible. People are so happy with what we've done.
A senior judge for the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York, Hellerstein is no stranger to sensitive cases. He's worked on dossiers linked to the September the 11th attacks and the Stormy Daniels hush money trial, where he twice rejected Donald Trump's attempts to have the case transferred to federal court.
Well, for more analysis now, I'm joined on the set by Edward Blumenthal, Associate Professor of Latin American Studies at the Sorbonne. Edward, thanks so much for coming in to see us on the set here at France 24.
Thank you.
What kind of impact is this capture and this trial of Maduro actually having inside Venezuela itself?
Inside Venezuela itself, well, I'm not a specialist on Venezuela. I thought we were more looking at the broader international picture. But I think for the moment the situation is confused, and the question is whether an agreement has been struck with the U.S. administration to allow for a continuation of the current regime, or whether there might be a broader destabilization of the Chavista regime.
Well, what about outside of Venezuela then, across Latin America? What kind of effect might all of this have on the region as a whole?
Well, I think you can see a further weakening of democratic norms and international law in the region to begin with. And it also depends on further U.S. reactions to the current situation. Right now, the region is deeply divided between center-left governments on the one hand, who condemned the kidnapping and armed intervention as a matter of international law, and far-right governments that tend to follow Trump. So in the short run, this will further strengthen far-right governments and undermine international law.
So give us a bit more context about all of this. I mean, here we have the U.S. swooping in, capturing Maduro, Trump saying now he's, quote, in charge of Venezuela. How does this kind of interventionism compare to what we've seen in history in the past?
Well, I would say it was kidnapping and not capturing. Capturing implies police operation on national soil, whereas this was an international operation by armed forces. But I think what we're seeing is a return to 19th century gunboat diplomacy, where while democracy is invoked to justify its actions, really it's a matter of imposing its weight on weaker nations and taking control of their natural resources.
So this is more for you, the world moving back to a doctrine of might is right.
Pretty clearly, I think, both the UN Charter signed after 1945 as well as inter-American instruments signed during the interwar period sought to put an end to this type of behavior by furthering peaceful resolution of conflict, outlawing the use of force in these conflicts, as well as territorial aggression. And the U.S. signed these in 1933 in Montevideo, in part as in reaction to further previous occupations and interventions at the end of the 19th and early 20th century.
So Donald Trump is spinning this now as being part of what he's calling his new Dunroe Doctrine after the Monroe Doctrine. I mean, just give us some context and explain that. What was the Monroe Doctrine and what's Trump trying to do now?
Well, the Monroe Doctrine was originally in the 19th century one that condemned European colonization of America, the continent. But in the late 19th and particularly early 20th century under Theodore Roosevelt turned into a justification for armed intervention in particularly the Caribbean and Central America in order to enforce debt collection, and led to a profound destabilization of these countries, it might be added. In no cases was democracy consolidated or encouraged, but rather a series of authoritarian regimes and dictatorships were the result of this policy.
And do you believe that's what will happen now with this kind of interventionism we're seeing from the U.S.?
Well, it's too early to determine exactly what will happen, of course. A worst case scenario, particularly in the case of a U.S. occupation, would be a profound destabilization of the regime. Of the country and the region. It should be noted that Trump is not only threatening Venezuela, but also Petro in Colombia, Greenland, and Mexico. But Venezuela is characterized by a multiplicity of armed actors, particularly on the border with Venezuela, the colectivos, there's various militias, as well as criminal groups, and the ELN, guerrilla group involved in drug trafficking on the border. If the Venezuelan state were to collapse in the context of an armed occupation, something similar to what happened in Iraq could evolve.
So what do you think is going to be happening in the coming months?
Again, I really have no idea what might be happening, but I think it can be safe to assume that the consolidation of democracy or the encouraging of democracy will not be the case, especially coming from a president who seemed determined to dismantle and weaken democratic institutions in his own country.
All right, Edward, thanks for coming in to talk to us. Edward Blumenthal there, professor at the Sorbonne. Thanks so much.